Hello, souls. I'm back and I'm here to deliver episode number 28 of our skin education series. And tonight I'm going to be talking all about melasma, which is a skin condition that is quite common and can be very, very challenging. And not only challenging, but sometimes just very difficult for the individual. So it's difficult to treat and it's difficult to manage, but it's also emotionally and mentally challenging as well. So I'm here to talk to you all about it tonight. And before we kind of get into this, I'm experimenting with a new camera tonight. So please let me know, can you hear me? Please pop a comment below, and can you also see me? I'm using my laptop tonight, so we will see. Super excited about this one. So thank you for bearing with me. Hello to whoever is watching. I can't see everyone who's here, but let's see what we can do about this. That's okay. Hello, Laura. Thank you. Yes and yes. That's just amazing. Great. It's all working. Alrighty, guys. So, melasma, have you heard of it before? It's commonly referred to sometimes as chlasma, and there is a distinct difference, but they're pretty similar in the nature. So I'm just going to group them together for the purpose of this video. But essentially, it's this skin pigmentation disorder, and it commonly occurs during pregnancy, can happen anytime in someone's life, but it most commonly happens to women are the majority, and it happens around that kind of somewhere mid-20s to mid-40s, and it usually happens around the time of altering your hormones for some reason. So think oral contraceptive or even just high amounts of stress, which we know affects our hormones. It's very annoying to treat, and it's very just annoying for the individual, because what happens, hello Kai, so what actually happens is the way it presents, I should say, it's basically patches of pigmentation that appear on the face. Now, you can always tell melasma from normal pigmentation, hyperpigmentation, because it basically appears on the face in a very symmetrical fashion. It's usually maybe on the forehead, and you'll see from side to side it's about the same. It's commonly looks like a butterfly, and it's also called the mask of pregnancy. So these are all terms that are thrown around, but it'll come up on the forehead or down near the eyes, or perhaps it'll come right down here, even very commonly across the cheeks, also very commonly on the side of the face here, and then also around the mouth. Now, every single person that has this condition will present differently. So everyone is unique. Everyone has a different skin. Hello, Mary. How are you? And yeah, it can be darker in some and it can be lighter in others. And as well, I should mention that it generally, anyone can be affected by this. However, it generally, those with a darker skin type, so sitting on about the Fitzpatrick type 3 to 4 now, and the way that looks is basically someone a little bit more tan than me, maybe my tan, but a little bit darker. That range of people, population and culturally, they are the ones that are most often affected by melasma. So tonight I'm going to be sharing a whole heap of information about this, just so you can kind of start seeing some links here and just understand this complex skin condition. And I say it's challenging to treat because it's not just a topical issue. There's a lot of internal triggers here, and it's kind of, you really want to be finding out what are all these little things, so you can first of all start to lighten that pigmentation on the skin, or at least stop it from triggering within your body. Now, I definitely don't know everything on this topic, and I'm not an expert in melasma. I have treated melasma clients before, but I have to say it's not something I've treated a lot. And there's a lot of information out there, but I definitely know I've got a big chunk that'll be really, really helpful for you. So basically, like I said, it presents on the skin in this symmetrical way. And what commonly those will do, they'll find it on the skin, it might come up during pregnancy, and the first thing is going, oh my goodness, need to change this in the skin. And often what the first port of call is for treatment, and this is because when you Google, when you look at things online, it's so easy to go down this pathway, let's say. The first thing most people go towards is cell renewal of the skin. So they're talking about extreme exfoliation and peels and microdermabrasion, because what that does, it actually takes off this top layer of the skin where the pigment, yes, the pigment has been deposited, and that's where it's showing up on the skin. But the thing is, this comes with a lot of risks, especially for melasma. So that's often the first port of call for treating melasma, when you're talking about going to a clinic or doing it at home. But there are a lot of options. Now, dermatologists do treat melasma, and so do beauty therapists, skin therapists, corneotherapists such as myself, and some also do it at home. But you'll find with melasma, the best treatment method for it is really being holistic in your approach. And that's what I do for melasma. It's about understanding all those little triggers. So I'll kind of at the end explain how, throughout this video, you'll find out how I treat melasma, but it's definitely, like I said, you've got to be holistic about it. So let's talk about one of the factors here. Now, I did kind of mention it before, and we're on the topic of hormones. Now, you might be thinking, how is this related to this skin condition? Aren't most skin conditions happening on the skin? And yes and no, but there's always, with most skin conditions, there is some sort of internal trigger that's perhaps being a cofactor or the cause. But melasma, out of all conditions that I've seen, I feel like it has more of an internal kind of thing going on, and it's very much related to the hormones. So like I said, pregnancy can be a really big trigger for melasma. We also have the oral contraceptive pill. We have certain medications like thyroxine, and other, also antidepressants and antipsychotics. These can all play a role as well. And it's basically, hello, Stephanie. It's basically through what those drugs are triggering in the body, and it basically tells the skin to produce more pigment. So basically there's a communication error going on in the skin. The skin cells are being told, you need to produce more pigment, but it's not really the case. We're not needing it there. Hello, mom's watching. So there's definitely a big hormonal issue happening here. It's also quite sensitive to heat and inflammation. Hello, Emily. Heat and inflammation are big causes. So when it's kind of like long exposure to heat, being in the sun is a huge causative factor of this issue, but we'll get into that one a little bit more. But think heat, so think hot, spicy foods can sometimes kind of create flushing in your body, in your skin, and kind of, not to say that there's a direct correlation here, but it's heating up the skin. But mainly, hello, Catherine, areas where you're having that prolonged heating. So I'm suggesting things like saunas, things of that nature, and just being in a hot climate as well. And inflammation is caused by internal things. So if you're you've got a disease going on underlying, or perhaps you have just been binging out on food, really bad food for a while, you've got a bit of inflammation going on. Whatever the case here, there's definitely a link. And we're also talking topical inflammation as well. So whenever the skin has become impaired, you've probably heard me talk a lot about the 3 lines of defense, or your barrier with your skin. And when they're down, so you've got 3 lines of defense, your barrier, your stratum corneum, and your lamellar lipid bilayers. That's basically some technical terms for the top layer of your skin and a couple of the different components of the skin. But essentially, when they are impaired and they're not functioning correctly, inflammation is occurring, because you've basically, an analogy to use that the amazing Robin McAlpine uses, and I hope I don't butcher this because I'm terrible at sayings, and not even just sayings, but analogies. So forgive me, but essentially she talks about the skin as a house, and the top, basically these top layers that I'm talking about, it's kind of like the roof of the house. And if you can think about a house, an actual house, if you take away the roof, or you have damage to the tiles on the top of the roof, the weather is going to get in. We're going to get a lot of dirt and muck, and it's going to be just a terrible environment within the house. Temperature regulation is going to be off. Everyone in the house is going to be grumpy. All kinds of things are going on. So that's kind of the way you can think about the skin's defense systems, essentially. So the roof of the house has been damaged, therefore inflammation will occur. I think I did pretty good at that. Fingers crossed. It's definitely, if you ever come across Robin McAlpine and her book Skin Side Out, she's a corneotherapist as well, in Christchurch. I might have the name of the city wrong, but essentially she owns a clinic. She's a corneotherapist. She's brilliant, really good at explaining the skin. So I highly suggest buying her book Skin Side Out. It's actually in such simple terms that honestly, even a child could read it and they would understand. So I digress. But essentially, when there is inflammation in the skin due to this impaired skin, the skin becomes defensive. The immune system is heightened. And when the skin is in defense mode, what it does is it starts to send incorrect messages. And essentially, I spoke about it in the last few episodes talking about pigmentation, but remember, if you did watch pigmentation, pigment in the skin is created due to a response. It's a protection for our skin. It's another line of defense. What happens is these little melanosomes, which are little, it's always good to get my diagram out here. Basically, the skin, here we go. Here they are. So these, look, we're backwards. My camera's backwards, so I have to, here we go. So can you see those little brown dots? Little melanosomes. So what happens is these dendritic arms actually come all the way up to the cells, and they deposit these little melanosomes. And what these melanosomes do, they actually go to the cell, and they actually kind of just like put a cap on the nucleus of the cell. Why does it do that? Well, that's in your nucleus is where the DNA is stored. So we really don't want the DNA of the cell to be damaged. And that's how pigmentation kind of occurs. It's a protection mechanism, but sometimes, like I said, this communication can go wrong and there is errors in everything. So essentially, everything's backwards for me. Here we go. So essentially what happens is communication's gone wrong, and these dendritic arms sit there and they're depositing these melanosomes into the cells when it's just not necessary or not needed. So it's overproducing, and it's really good to know, and yeah, you need to know this, but the melanosomes and the dendritic arms, they have a really good memory. So what happens once it's deposited to a certain area, it kind of remembers this, and it's like, all right, well, last time I did this, when this happened, we went out in the sun and we're exposed to the UV, and it's been enough times now that it's just, we need to basically need to keep producing, and they keep depositing even if the external factors aren't there. It's kind of got a memory. So it doesn't work in your favor, but what we need to do if we're going to treat holistically, basically, instead of taking away that top layer of the skin and just kind of hoping for the best, what we need to do is treat holistically and get to the root cause and disrupt the actual production of this whole cycle that happens. And I spoke about this last week as well. It's the melanogenesis. It's just the technical word for the, here it is, melanogenesis. 5 distinct steps. But essentially, when we want to disrupt this process, is how pigment is made in the skin. And we need to think about all these factors all together. So I said I'd mention it just before in regards to taking away this top layer, and I'm going to touch on it briefly, and I'm going to tell you why it's not the best course of treatment for melasma. So like I said, it's so backwards, here we are. The melanocyte actually lives down here on this bottom, the basal cell layer, just near the junction. And basically, when you do microdermabrasion or peels, you're taking off these top layers. And the thing is, these melanosomes are pigmenting, yes, these top layers, but the thing is, that melanocyte is still there. And remember, it has a memory, it has these arms, and if you just take away this top layer, what you're also doing is actually impairing your defense system. So your stratum corneum being that top layer, your barrier, which is kind of the secretions on your skin, and the lamella, I always have trouble with that one, the lamellar lipid bilayers, which are kind of within this area here. So you take those 3 down and you basically have a recipe for disaster for melasma, because what that does, it increases inflammation. It means that this is impaired and it's not functioning as well. So it's thinking, if you go out into the sun, it's like, oh my God, we need protection. So what's another line of defense? Send the melanocyte up, get them to send the melanosomes up. And what you'll end up finding is that the melasma will just continue to be there because you haven't actually disrupted this process. All you've done is just take away the cells, and it's just not an effective method in my books. Now, if you are interested, if you go onto PubMed or Google Scholar or whatever you like, you'll find that there's just so much research out there when it comes to melasma. Yet it is a skin condition that is, wow, it's just very hard to treat, and it's often there aren't a lot of success stories that you hear of. So why is there an overwhelming amount of evidence and we're just not getting those results, or we're not hearing about these results as often? And it really comes down to it being such a complex disorder. Now, you'll find in these journal articles, they really talk about different kinds of ingredients that are very promising, and there is definitely a lot of promising ingredients and others that have been, for one, banned in Australia and other countries, and just not the best way to go about it. So when we're treating in a sophisticated, more advanced way, we actually don't go to this method of taking away this top layer. We actually want to give the skin ingredients that inhibit this process from the beginning. So I spoke about this the other last week and the week before about interrupting tyrosinase. So I don't want to go too much into detail, but essentially what that is using certain ingredients that have an ability to inhibit tyrosinase. So let's just break this down really, really simplistically, because we can go on about all of this all day, but you as the consumer, as the client, as the person dealing with the skin condition, if you are watching today, you want to know what to do. So my first port of call is to actually really, really limit that sun exposure. You just basically need to make sure the skin is not unprotected from the sun. So you need to be wearing sunscreen all the time and being so diligent, reapplying, using the correct amount. You also want to be wearing your polarized sunglasses, because remember, we spoke about this in the previous episodes, the the UV that comes through the retina of your eye actually stimulates this melanogenesis process, and it can create pigmentation on the skin. Crazy, right? You've also got to make sure you're limiting, inflammatory conditions. You want to make sure that your skin is functioning well, the barrier is intact, and your skin is healthy. So you want to improve that cell-to-cell communication, giving your skin the best chance to essentially combat the melasma and stop it from misbehaving. Thank you for the likes, guys. I really appreciate it. And yeah, so we want to just basically, you want to use the sunscreen, you want to limit the inflammation, and you also want to start treating it once you've got the barrier healed and intact. So you want to start treating with these topical actives. Now, there are so many, but some of the ones that I use here in clinic are vitamin B, and in that we have vitamin B3, and B3 is also known as niacinamide. You've probably heard it. It is a well-known anti-aging ingredient. It's very regenerative for your skin, and it is also a tyrosinase inhibitor. So basically, again, it's disrupting the transfer of pigment of melanin in the skin. We also have azelaic acid. It's another one that I have access to, and we find that in the liposome concentrate plus blend. It is brilliant for healing a barrier impaired skin. It has it really helps with texture in the skin as well, and it can also fight against some common skin bacteria like melasma on the skin. So it's a really good ingredient, as well as being a tyrosinase inhibitor. So those two are our musts. We also have vitamin C. Vitamin C is fantastic for its whitening abilities, but it's also mainly a tyrosinase inhibitor as well, but it's a very strong antioxidant. And actually, the vitamin B is also an antioxidant. And the reason why we need antioxidants in the skincare regime to treat melasma in the first place is it interrupts this oxidization that happens in the skin. What happens when there's oxidization? Basically, in simple terms, damage and permanent damage, essentially, unless we have those antioxidants in our skincare regime or in our body to counteract. So your antioxidants are really important. Some other popular ingredients. Oh, sorry, I have one more from my clinic. It's called the whitening pigment. Now, it's basically it's a beautiful blend of kind of flower and plant extracts that are known for lightening a skin. So yeah, it's a great add-on. So it helps to lighten and whiten the skin. We also have, can't believe I almost forgot about it. Vitamin A. Vitamin A is fantastic because what it does, it starts to repair the DNA of the cells, your skin cells, and it basically helps the skin to self-renew. It improves that cell-to-cell communication. So and it's also a powerful antioxidant, so you want that in there as well. So there are just some of the factors, but some other ingredients that you might have heard around the place are things like hydroquinone, kojic acid, licorice. There's so many. There's some patented ingredients like chroma white and all of these different ingredients. And most of them in some form, arbutin, disrupt tyrosinase. But the thing is, some of them are banned. So kojic acid, for example, you can't use that in Australia because it causes, apparently there's some links to health side effects. So not the best ingredient to be investing in, but it does have a pretty effective change in the skin. But the thing is, you are at the expense of damaging the skin and impairing it and causing more sensitization. So really, you want to do your due diligence, and all of these ingredients, they might have studies to back them up, but we really need to know, what are all the other factors involved. So we've got to make sure we're preserving your skin. We want to make sure it's healthy and the barrier is intact. That's my main port of call. Make sure the skin is intact and operating well. And then we really want to talk about, one-on-one, what are the factors that are potentially inhibiting, not inhibiting, but causing your melasma. There's so many more, but a lot of them are hormonally linked, the sun exposure, all kinds of things. So that's how I essentially treat melasma. And you just have to be so diligent with melasma, because as soon you can do all this work, bringing back the barrier, inhibiting this tyrosinase and putting in all the hard yards. But then as soon as you get this unprotected sun exposure, it just pops up once again. And this is because that melanocyte has that memory. So my best recommendation, if you have it now, then definitely come see me or another skin therapist, and we'll talk to you in more detail about your specific case. However, if you are perhaps you're of the darker skin color and you have a family history of melasma, or maybe you just don't want to develop melasma in the first place, you want to do everything possible not to have it in the first place. Basically, what you want to do, you just want to wear your sunscreen and be protecting yourself from UV. It's not going to make you immune from it, but what you're doing is giving your skin the best possible outcome. Because what happens, well, a lot of things happen when you're exposed to UV unprotected, but one of the big things that happens, it basically disrupts that cell-to-cell communication. I know I keep coming back to it, but it disrupts that whole process, and things just go wrong. And essentially over time, when just the melanocyte is being assaulted, it just can't come back from this, and it becomes weakened and impaired. So you want to preserve those cells in your skin, so then you're kind of preventing malfunction later down the road. So that's my best recommendation. And my recommendation for sunscreen, I use the Dermavisuals ones here, and I think they're great. There's a lot of nice ones out there in terms of the ingredient list and being safe for the environment and safe for your body and all these things. But I found a lot of the really nice ones on the skin, they just don't tend to be vegan, because I meticulously analyze these cosmetic ingredients, and I only ever select sunscreens that tick all the boxes in safety and efficacy. But I haven't yet found one that ticks safety, efficacy, and feels nice on the skin, and it is also vegan. So it's what's the saying? It's a white buffalo. Haven't found one yet. If you've found one, please let me know. And but the ones I have here in the clinic are absolutely amazing. But it's nice to have other options out there, and the ones I have in clinic are vegan. It's just that they're not suitable they are suitable for everyone, just not everybody loves the texture, although the texture is really nice and I hardly get complaints about it. So that's just one of those things. And so you want to wear your sunscreen, you want to cover up, so I love the little love hearts and the smiley faces. So you want to make sure your décolleté is covered, your neck, the back of your ears, your whole head. You want to wear your hat, whether it be a cap or a broad brim being the better option. And you just want to limit that sun exposure. Don't hide away inside and think the sun is evil. You need the sun. It makes you feel amazing. Just go out into the sun when the rays aren't as harsh. That is it for tonight, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and I've really enjoyed being here with you. And please let me know if you have any questions. I wish I could talk more into detail, but it really is a individual thing when it comes to melasma. And on that note, have a wonderful, wonderful night, and we'll see you here next week, same time. No, not next week, guys. Next week, I've actually taken the weekend, the day off, because it's a very special somebody's birthday. It's my partner, Daniel. It's his birthday, and we're going to celebrate it. So I couldn't come on here and do it live. I just thought that wouldn't be fair, would it? As much as I love it. Anyhow, have a really, really lovely week, and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow for Wellness Wednesday. All right, take care, everyone. Bye.